I'm Josie Thomson. I reside in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a 2 times cancer survivor, and I've also had 3 near-death experiences. And if you would ask me to introduce myself, I'd be like lost for words right now, because as a consequence of recent experiences, which I will share with you today, I am redefining my whole sense of reality and who I am in the world. And I guess when you have experiences like this, it's going to affect your life in a way that you could never have anticipated until you actually have one of these things. So let me tell you my story. I grew up as part of a huge Italian family in Melbourne, Victoria. I'm probably related to half of Melbourne, and I'm also the eldest daughter of the Italian family. And part of that means that there is a heavy sense of duty and responsibility as being the eldest daughter of the family. And that was my experience growing up in the family, who I knew loved me beyond doubt. But there was a lot of expectation placed upon me, and I could never feel a sense of being able to express my sense of truth and say what I really wanted to say. So it wasn't surprising back in 1991, at the age of 24, I had a little lump in my throat and went and had it investigated, and it ended up being stage 3 malignant cancer. And if you think about it, in 1991, there actually wasn't a lot of cancer spoken about or even experienced in the world. Times have certainly changed, and there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. But I guess for me, no one in my family had ever had it. We barely heard the word. I think there was a distant auntie who had had breast cancer several years before, and she died. So if you heard the word cancer in 1991, there was this automatic assumption that you were going to die. And so naturally, when the doctor uttered those words, felt surreal. Like I heard the words, I understood the words, but there was an aspect of my awareness that remained really neutral, unaffected by the news. And I remember lying in the hospital bed when he said this, because unfortunately what it meant was he had done the surgery, but only removed the right lobe of my thyroid gland, because he assumed it was just a growth there. And because of my age and the fact that I was super fit, super healthy, never drank, never smoked, they didn't bother with the biopsy. So he just went in, removed that lobe, and then discovered it was stage 3 malignant cancer. So we needed a second surgery. And when he delivered that news, he said, Josie, he even said, I don't even know how to tell you this, but it is cancer, it is stage 3, and it is malignant. And I remained completely silent and still. And he looked at me as if I wasn't comprehending, but I fully understood. But there was no need to react. There was almost like a part of me knew that that was going to be the result. But I also somehow knew I was going to be okay. And he said to me, well, we need to do a second surgery, and we need to do it swiftly because we've disturbed it now and it may be spreading. And these words fell out of my mouth without me even thinking about them. And I essentially said, if you don't do this by first thing tomorrow morning, I will never let you touch me again. So I just knew I didn't need a lot of time to think about it and ruminate about it, because I knew my brain would freak me out. But there was this calmness in my being that said, don't buy into the fear. Just be present and go the journey. And I didn't understand that at the time, because I was brought up a Roman Catholic. I was more religious than spiritual, but this was about to set a totally new path in my life, this whole experience, because I did have the second surgery the next morning. And then I was in intensive care for about 2 weeks. And over that time was when I experienced my first near-death experiences. I had 2 in the first week in intensive care. And the first time it happened, I was totally unconscious. I was aware that family members in the room, and even though my eyes were closed and my body was not responsive, I could tell you who was in the room. I could tell you what conversations were had. It was almost like the body was asleep, but my awareness was totally awake and present in the whole room. And it was like this impartial observer of what was going on. There was no need to react. It was just a pure witnessing of whatever was happening without any judgment. It was really quite curious. Anyway, the first time I had the near-death experience, an aspect of my awareness was floating up at the ceiling level, looking down at my physical body. So I was perfectly aware that an aspect of me was here and another aspect of me was here in the bed, so I could see the body. And then all of a sudden I saw the vitals on the screen go flat. So the body flatlined, and here I was just floating serenely in a sense of just whiteness. It was real serenity. It was really peaceful. And I saw the nurses race in to attend to the body and just try to revive me. And while that was all happening, I was just blissfully observing. And all of a sudden, there was this booming male voice that came in to the left side of me, and it said, "It's not your time yet." And with that, I was automatically put straight into my physical body again. So I did not regain consciousness at that time. I stayed in this unconscious state of being. And then the very next day, the same thing happened again. An aspect of me floated up to the ceiling, looking down at the physical body. And I was aware that, the body had lost a lot of blood. I was very weak and they weren't sure what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, while I'm just blissfully floating here, this great big male voice came in again and said exactly the same thing. "It's not your time yet." And it was like lightning speed. I was back in my body. It was like a bit of a jolt. I could feel that reconnection with the physical body. And then I started recovering, and doctors were giving me information about different treatments and what options I should take. And I was 24. I didn't know much about cancer. I'd heard the word. It was a scary word. All of a sudden it was happening to me. But there was this will in me that instead of focusing on not dying, instead of focusing on fighting the cancer, there was this drive and automatic focus on living. And when I did that, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how I needed to adjust what I ate. I knew how I needed to adjust the environments I placed myself in. I knew how to adjust the types of people that I associated with. I mean, I even moved interstate just to be able to wake up to the sunshine every day. There was something intuitively that awakened in me that allowed me, for the first time in my whole life, to speak up for myself and to assert my own truth and to blaze my own trail. And that's exactly what I did. So if you think about, the throat is the center of expression, and I had had 24 years of suppression and not allowed to assert myself and my own will. And all of a sudden, cancer gave me permission to express myself and to assert my own will in the direction I chose. And so all of a sudden, I found myself in a new state with no one I knew, in a new job, but waking up to the sunshine every day. And that made me feel good. And I realize now, having studied neuroscience, that there's a lot of science that proves the benefits of having sunshine in your face and on your body every single day. And that's what I do. And I got well. Long story short, I had some fairly gruesome treatments, some of which I ceased midstream because I decided they didn't taste good and I didn't like how they made my body feel. So I decided to explore a lot of different healing modalities. And that's when my mind and my heart and my arms were opened up to this whole new world of, natural therapies and remedies. And I embraced all that and I made a full recovery. So then I had my second big surgery, which was in 2010. So this is fast forward quite a significant amount of years. And on Christmas Eve 2009, I was diagnosed with a lesion in the frontal lobe of my brain. And somehow I didn't want to upset my family through the festive season and tell them about it. I knew that we were going to have surgery. So the surgery was booked for the 28th of January, 2010. So I had to get through Christmas and New Year and somehow not upset my family. So I decided not to tell them. But they could tell that I was suppressing something because I wasn't fully present, because a part of me was still kind of concerned about this other circumstance that I wasn't being truthful about with them. But after the new year, I let them know about it. And predictably, I knew why I shouldn't have told them during the festive season, because when you tell people that love you that there's a significant health concern, it's natural for them to freak out and get scared. And unfortunately, because we have this system in the brain called mirror neuron systems, basically what that means is that we can take on what's going on for someone else, especially if we're attached to them or really close to them. And so that's where we really need a sense of healthy boundaries to be able to own ourselves, allow people to have their own experiences and reactions, and just not absorb them, that you can observe them. And that was a really big lesson for me as an empath. That's been a lifetime lesson for me. So a friend of mine had said, listen, before you have this surgery, because it's a big one, if you have a look at my head, I've got a scar that goes from here all the way around to the back of my head, where they lifted the lid and took out what they needed to take out. She said, you need to go and see this spiritual healer interstate, because something says to me that you need to go and see her before you have your surgery. So I gave her a call. And usually, apparently, she's got a 2-year wait. And I said, listen, I'm having surgery and I really need to see you before I have the surgery. She started laughing. She said, when's your surgery? And I told her, and she said, oh, look, love, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to get in. And she said, oh, wait a minute. I just had a cancellation this morning. And she had a look at the diary and she said, can you come on the 26th of January, which was 2 days before my surgery. So I flew down to Sydney. And I had this 5-hour session with this spiritual healer who I'd never seen or heard of a trance channeler before. But what she basically does is that when there are entities that seek to connect and deliver a message to you, they safely enter her body and then she channels them through her body. You get whatever message you need. I'd never seen this before. So anyway, she warned me about it. She said, listen, I'm in the room. I'm not going to leave the room, but whoever needs to come and speak with you will come through my body. You don't need to fear. You can ask whatever you want. If you want to stop it at any time, you can just say stop and I'll come back in and, you'll be fine. I said, okay. And I was very skeptical. I'm like, yeah, right, here we go. So anyway, she did this thing with her head and we made this sound. And then all of a sudden she kind of crouched forward and this male Asian voice started coming out of her mouth. And I was taken aback and I was watching her and I was like, what? And all of a sudden this male started talking to me and said, in 2 days' time, you'll be offered all these different treatment plans. The only one that you must take is this. And he went into a lot of detail. And I was sitting there taking it all in. It was kind of really surprising, And I asked a few questions. And it ended up, I found out later on, he introduced himself, but I didn't know who he was. And I had studied Reiki several years before. Anyway, this doctor that came through was the doctor who invented Reiki. He's the one that gave me all this advice about what to do, what not to do when I went into hospital in 2 days. And I'm like, wow, I need to pay attention here. So then we finished that conversation. She did this thing with her neck. She came back in just to check in on me. She said, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. That was strange, And she said, oh, there's someone else here. I went, okay. So here we go. Then she did this thing. And then all of a sudden her body grew big, like in the seat. And my nails went into the chair. I was like worried. I'm like, what's this going to be? And then all of a sudden this big male voice started booming out of her body. And I recognized it immediately because this was the voice that spoke to me in 1991 that said, it's not your time yet. And I'm sitting there, all the hair on my body standing up. And this voice is saying, in 2 days' time, you will be given a choice, but you must decide. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he went on to describe, he said, in 2 days' time, you will decide whether you return home to me because you belong to my choir, or you continue to live on earth and your work commences in earnest. And I went, how do you respond to that? And at this stage, I did not know which way I would decide because I think it would be a decision made at a level beyond my conscious awareness. So, I was filled with tears. I felt unconditional love from this being. And then I had the courage to ask. I said, "Who are you?" And then there was this silence. And then all of a sudden, he responded, "I am Archangel Gabriel." And in that instant, I just had this knowing that Archangel Gabriel had been with me since I was a child. This angel was always the one I would sit beside me when I'd go anywhere. You know, on a tram, I wouldn't let people sit there because I'd say my angel sitting next to me. Or if I'd sit down and have a meal, I'd always have an empty seat beside me and say, my angel is sitting here, and I wouldn't let anyone sit there. And then after time, you know, people ridiculed me, made fun of me, and would sit in the seat. And it got to a point where I think I just lost the connection. I just forgot about it because it was dismissed by everyone, and I was young and naive and didn't know what I didn't know. But I realized at that very minute that this was the angel that was with me from day one. And he's been with me ever since. That connection will never be broken now. So then we finished that conversation, and the healer came back into her body. And then she said, "Oh, hang on a minute, there's one more." And then she did this thing again, and then her body shrank into this little voice started coming out of her mouth. And the voice said, "Hello," you know, and I'm like, "Okay, who's this?" And she said, "Do you know how you love babies?" I said, "Yeah, I love babies." No, she said, "You really love babies?" I said, "Yeah, I do." She said, "Do you know why?" I said, "No." And she said, "Because when you're up here, you're in charge of us and you always make us laugh and we have lots of fun." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's a little cherub angel. And she's like, "I've got something for you." And she goes into this, she gets up, starts trashing the office, like pulling out drawers, throwing things out like a kid would when they're looking for something. She's like she's like, "I've got something for you. I've got something for you." And she's throwing everything everywhere. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get in trouble. And then she finds this thing and she comes back and she goes, "I found it. I found it." And you know, when you go to the beach and you see stacked layers of shells, and sometimes they're chipped and they're a bit powdery. She hands me this shell and she points to the powdered bit and she said, "See this?" She said, "This is your bones. They're very sick and we're going to make them better." Now, what nobody else knew was, as well as finding this lesion on my brain, we'd also discovered 3 points of bone cancer on my right hip, my right ribs, and around my skull. So we were going to treat the bone cancer after I had this cranial surgery. And all of a sudden, this little angel's telling me that she knows about it. They're going to fix my bones. I'm like, okay, my full attention totally here. And then this angel says to me, "When you go into the hospital, make sure they strap this shell in your hand because we're going to be with you." And the other thing that Archangel Gabriel said to me was, when you go into surgery, make sure you have your palms facing up because we will be holding your hands. And I was like, okay. So anyway, I go into the hospital, I take this shell with me, I show it to the anaesthetist and the doctor, and I ask them, "Would you please strap this shell to my palm?" And they looked to make sure there was no metal in the shell or anything. And without even asking me any questions about it, which is so unusual, they said, "Yep, no problem. Go figure." So they strapped that. And as I was being put under anesthetics, I remembered to put my palms facing up. And at this time, I still had no clue which way I was going to decide. So I was unconscious, surgery occurred, and then several hours later, I opened my eyes and I was like, okay, I'm still alive. I've clearly decided. But little did I realize that I couldn't walk or talk properly for 6 months after this surgery. But when I was coming out of the anesthetics, the doctor came in, the surgeon came in just to make sure I was okay, checking in on me. And, you know, I couldn't talk. I didn't realize I couldn't talk at this stage. I was just groggy. But then I was in hospital for a couple of weeks. That was all fine. I didn't have any NDEs during this time. But all of a sudden, I was released to go home. My balance and my spatial awareness was totally whacked. I couldn't string a proper sentence together because something had gone awry. And all of a sudden, you know, I was home. I could hear what my brain wanted me to say or what my brain wanted my body to do, and the body was not responding in kind. So all of a sudden, the thing that I had done for several years before this, leading up to this surgery, is I had started studying masters in neuroscience. So I had learned enough to understand the principles of neuroplasticity, which basically means this is how we rewire the brain, right? So the doctor was, saying to me, look, I'm sorry, Josie, we're going to let you go home. You just need to heal. You need to rest. It's going to take several months. Come and see me again. We'll have a call on the phone in 3 months but come and see me in 6 months. I said, yep, no problem. But little did he realize that he said to me, I don't know that you'll be able to walk or talk properly again. And it was actually a good thing that I couldn't talk properly, because if I was able to say what I really wanted to say, it would not have been kind. And that's not me, right? I knew enough in my brain from what I'd studied to know what I needed to do to be able to retrain these capacities. Now, it wasn't going to be easy. I understood that, and it was incredibly frustrating. And there were days that I was so upset and disappointed and mad, because I wasn't getting anywhere fast. And this is where I really needed to learn to trust, and I needed to learn practice, and I needed to learn perseverance, and I realized, I was about to convert theory into practice, into reality. And that's what I did in those 6 months. Every day I went outside with the help of my mother, sat on the grass, and just became really present. This is when I learned what mindfulness and meditation really was. Before that, I would never slow down for 5 minutes to do anything like that. I never had time to do that. Whereas all of a sudden I had all this time, and I knew that it was important to calm my whole nervous system down and to create an inner peace that would allow my body to heal and to remember the capacities that I was able to do prior to surgery. So every day I would sit out there in nature, I would calm my nervous system down, and I would rehearse mentally what it was like to speak clearly, what it was like to stand and walk with steadiness, So it was this mental rehearsal over and over again. And again, drawing from my studies in neuroscience, the way neuroplasticity works is that you fix your intentional focus on a pattern that you're wanting to create. It takes focused attention, then it takes repetition, and then positive reinforcement. So every time you get it right, you make sure you reinforce that with, yay, I did it, something to get that dopamine level up in the brain, to give you a sense of reward, to keep going, to keep growing, to not give up. And I knew that if I could do that every single day, I was going to get well. There was just this knowing, because I knew what to do. And the only person that was going to stop me was me. So I realized for the first time how powerful we are, what we're really capable of, right between our ears, but we're not taught how to use it. We're not taught how to do it. And that's really become my mission now, to really show people what we are capable of doing. And I guess these experiences have come to me to demonstrate that will and that power that we do have, that I have actually overcome the odds on several occasions, drawing from science, which definitely assists and support us. But there's more to it than that. We need to bridge science with spirituality, and that's the secret source of healing. So now I'm going to fast forward. About 3 years ago, as a consequence of this surgery in my brain, there's a significant amount of scar tissue, and that scar tissue has been leaning on significant networks of nerves, which has resulted in a chronic autonomic nervous system disorder. And basically what that meant was that my blood pressure could drop in an instant without warning. So I could fall, I could pass out, I could black out. Like, it was a pretty scary place to live in this body while all of that was going on. And this was going on for, as I said, about 3 years. And I was in a lot of pain, especially down the right side of my body. And the doctors were trying everything. We tried trial drugs. We tried all sorts of manipulations and different synthetic alternatives. And then I saw a third neurologist who suggested that we try ketamine treatment. And basically what that meant was, a fairly high dose of ketamine over a sustained period, supervised in hospital, that would hopefully heal the symptoms for a period of time, but would have to be repeated every now and again. So I went in for the first time in November 2022 for a week, and that was extremely successful. And I started on half the usual dose because my body's very sensitive, and it was supervised very carefully. And after that week, I had 6 months of being pain-free, and it was significantly wonderful. And then in July last year, 2023, naturally, the doctor said, okay, it was so successful last time, let's go in and do a second round. I said, okay, I trusted them because having had gone through the first time, it was fairly good and I didn't space out or have any negative side effects from it at all. So this time though, the pain specialist decided to start me on a higher dose than I ended with the first time. And I looked at her and I remember saying to her, is that necessary given that I had success with the low dose last time? Do I need to go extra this time? She said, well, I'd like to start extra because I want it to last longer. So somewhere in my mind, it still didn't feel right, but I trusted her that she knew what she was doing. So we started off on a higher dose, and the first day I was kind of feeling a little bit unbalanced on my feet. The world was kind of moving in strange ways, and I let them know about that, and they said, oh, your body's just adjusting. But after about the third day on this dose, I started experiencing some significant discomfort just underneath my right breastplate. And it was like flaring pain. And I called the nurses, they called the registrar doctors because it was the weekend. They didn't want to call the pain doctor. And I said, I think you need to call the pain doctor. This is unacceptable. This is really painful. And they gave me drugs to dampen down the pain and basically weren't attending to me properly. And I was really getting quite distressed. I rang my GP and I told him, and he said, you need to assert yourself and tell them what you want to do. So I asked them to remove it. They refused to remove it. They said, you have to wait till Monday. This was Saturday night. And I had a really, really terrible night. And then the next day, my body went into toxic shock. And it was an emergency situation. Basically, my liver was totally smashed. My liver function was like, when they got the readings the next day, they realized there was a significant problem. Anyway, that night, I experienced my third near-death experience. The body did die, and all of a sudden, I became aware of this beautiful golden grid that lifted up and out of my physical body. And it was a color of gold that I'd never witnessed before. It was almost like lava, those different shades of golden, yellow, and orange, like that, coming up out of my solar plexus and my heart. And it was just beautiful. And I'm looking and I'm observing this. So I'm aware that my body's completely gone, unconscious, dead, actually. And I saw this beautiful golden grid. And then in the right corner of the room, I saw this white torus field come descending, like drawing this golden grid out of the body and bringing it into this white light. I interfered and I said, wait, stop. Am I dying here? And for that split second, I could feel a sense of human emotion. It wasn't panic. It was just like, no, wait, I haven't said goodbye yet. So that's what I said. I said, wait, I haven't said goodbye yet. So an aspect of my awareness was able to leave the hospital room and go and find my father in the garden interstate and say goodbye to him. I went and saw my mum in the kitchen where she was cooking, and I was able to say goodbye to her. I found my sister at her house. I found my brother in his vehicle. I found my two children to say goodbye to them. And then my awareness was back in the room, and these two light energies were suspended here. And I said, okay, I'm ready now. And I was willing to just surrender and go. But then this other huge voice just rose up out of me and said, not so fast. It's I that will decide when you tap out, not you. And all of a sudden I was like, who's this? This was a voice I'd never heard before. And it was one of those voices like Archangel Gabriel, you don't mess with that voice. And I'm like, what do you mean? And this voice said, you've pushed me, you've used me, you've abused me, you've burnt me out, you don't listen to me. And it was going on a rant. And I could feel myself crying. Like I literally, the physical body had tears coming out of the eyes. And everything this voice said was absolutely true. And then the voice said, so it's me that's going to decide when you go, not you. When I decide to stop breathing, then you will go. And that's when I realized that was the voice of my body. I never even knew the body had a voice like that. It sounded like me. It was more willful, it was very assertive. There was no messing around with it. It's almost like I'd heard that voice several times before, like, hey, let's go for a walk. Hey, let's do this. Like, hey, don't eat that. But I would dismiss it. It was almost like it was optional. But this interaction was not optional at all. It was directing me and asserting its will over me. And I was like, wow, okay then. And then several hours later, I regained consciousness. But now I'd had this awareness of the soul grid coming out of my body and the Torus field coming in to retrieve the soul. I didn't see any other entities around. And now I had this profound, newfound relationship with my body. And for the first time, I understood what it meant when I heard those words, you know, the house of God, you know, your body's your temple. I knew those words mentally, but all of a sudden I knew those words in an embodied way. Like I got it. I get it now. And so my relationship with my body has been completely transformed. I consult with my that voice with my body every day. You know, hey, what do you think? Should we do this? Should we do this? And I'm focusing on what it feels like, how to cultivate a sense of joy within this physical form, how to cultivate pure peace within this physical form. No matter what's going on around us, we get to choose the environment within which we operate. Because whilst we can't control any of that stuff out of us, we get to control our thoughts, therefore the vibration and frequency that we house in this body. And that has a massive effect on our healing capability and how we navigate the world around us. So my life has been completely transformed, taken to another level. And then, so that was last year. And then in January this year, my life just keeps unfolding in mysterious and wonderful, mystical ways. And I'm so open now to responding to the calls that I receive. And in January, I had this reoccurring dream 4 nights in a row of a cave. And on the 4th evening, I woke up and I said, where's this cave? And the voice said, it's in Delphi. So I looked up Delphi. Oh, it's in Greece. Let's go to Greece. Okay, I'm going to Greece to find a cave. Okay, so that's what I did. So in May this year, I got on a plane and I got to Delphi and I started asking people about a cave in Delphi. And they're like, no, there's no cave. And I'm like, yes, there is. And they're going, no, there's no cave in Delphi. I'm like, yes, there is. And they're like, how do you know? And I said, because I dreamt it. And so they're looking at me like I'm loony. And then I found a little old lady and I sat her down and I said, do you know anything about a cave in Delphi? And she looked at me and she said, why do you want to know? And I told her about my dream and how I listened and I'm here just for that. And she pulled out this map, it was a hand-drawn map, and she pointed to a cave. There are several caves in Delphi, but she pointed to one in particular. And I said, yes, that's it. As soon as I saw it, I went, that's it. Now, Delphi is about 600 meters above sea level. The cave is like 1,300 meters above sea level. It's quite a hike and it's an old goat trail and it's about 17 kilometers to get up there. Anyway, the next day I eventually made my way up to the cave. As soon as I saw it, every hair on my body just stood up and I just kept saying, I am here. I am here. And I don't even know why I was saying that, but it just kept repeating, I am here. I walked into the cave and it was magnificent. It was massive. It was just huge and it was beautiful. And I've never been a cave person, well, not in this lifetime anyway. And dark, wet, scary places like that would never normally appeal to me. But this particular cave really called me. And something said, you need to go and sit at the back of the cave. And I'm like, okay. So I had to climb over rocks and I went and sat at the back of the cave. And when I sat at the back of the cave, I could not see any light at all. I couldn't see the front opening of the cave at all. It was completely black. And I had the torch of my phone with me, so I was able to get there safely. I sat down and it was dark and it was wet. And I closed my eyes and then all of a sudden I started seeing colour, like rainbow colours that I have never seen with my eyes before. And I'm like, what? How's this happening? And I'm opening and closing my eyes to see if it made any difference. It didn't make any difference at all. I'm like, okay, this is strange. And then I just closed my eyes and I started meditating and I could feel the cave breathing around me. It's almost like it had its own heartbeat. It was coming in and out around me as I was breathing. And it was so beautiful. And I was there for about an hour or so. And then I said out loud, I was chanting a little bit, and the resonance in the cave was beautiful. And I brought a little amethyst crystal with me, and I said out loud, hey, I brought you a gift. And I heard a voice say, I want the green heart. I said, what? And then I heard it again, I want the green heart. And in my backpack, I had a big green opal crystal that I used to use for meditation. It was quite large, and I used to hold it in my hands. I said, no, that's my meditation crystal. I'm not giving you that. And then I heard it again. I want the green heart. So I took this green crystal out of my backpack and I put the torch on it and I'm looking at it in my hand and I'm like, what's this attachment that I have to this green heart? Why can't I give this to the cave? I have traveled halfway around the world to be here. And if this is what it wants, why can't I give this to the cave? And I could feel this, you know, like sometimes when we have our belongings and we have attachments to them, they own us. And I could feel this tearing in my heart. And I went, okay, fine, you can have it. And the second I said that, I felt this relief. And I went to put the crystal down, but my hand was directed to a place a little bit further down in the cave. And before I could put it down, it was literally taken out of my hand and just swept down into this crevice. And all of a sudden, I became aware that there was an energy in the cave and I got scared. I was like, well, hang on, how did that happen? Wow, you know, and the sound of this crystal making its way down to this crevice was quite loud, you know. And I sat down, my heart was racing and I put my hands on my chest and I was trying to breathe calmly just to settle my nervous system. And I said out loud, I'm scared. And then this voice said, there's no need to fear. We are here. And I'm like, I don't even care who you are. I just want to not be scared right now. And so I was there just a couple of minutes to calm myself down. And then the second I put my hands down on my knees, I just totally relaxed. Every cell in my body started tingling. And then my hands went like pins and needles times 1,000, like full on. And I'm sitting there not really understanding what's happening. And I said out loud, I don't understand what's happening, but I'm just going to say thank you because that way I'm not going to get scared. So I just kept saying, I kept breathing and saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and just allowing and allowing. And that went on for about 15 minutes. And then it just totally stopped. And I just felt totally calm, totally peace. It was just profound. And then I had a bit of a conversation with that voice. And I looked at the time and I thought, wow, you know, I had to meet the driver 6 hours later and it was getting close to time. So I needed to make a move. So I started making my way to the front of the cave. And before I left, the voice said, you are to return with a circle of 8. And I looked back and I said, done. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. I made my way down the mountain. I found the old lady. I told her what happened in the cave, and she teared up. And she said, "Do you know what that cave is?" I said, "No." And she said, "That was the cave that Dionysius taught Christianity in before the Romans came and removed him." And I went, "Okay, wow." And I could see that because of the size of that cave, it could easily have been a site for mystery schools and gatherings. It was profound. So what has it meant for me since then? Well, my life is so different now. You know, it's like, did I hear the call? Yes, I did. Did I answer the call? Yes, I did. Did I trust it? Yes, I did. Did I even know why I was going there for? No, I didn't. Did I surrender the heart? Yes, I did. And now I'm in the process with my doctors of proving that I have received a full spontaneous healing. So by now I should have had 2 more rounds of ketamine treatments, but I have had no pain. I've had no issues with my blood pressure. I haven't fallen. I haven't blacked out. In fact, I just feel so serenely at peace. And my life now is in service to wherever I'm called to be. And that's my story.